People often misunderstand a woman's silence. They think it's apathy, a sign that she's over it, that she doesn't care whether you reach out or not. But that's rarely the full picture. In fact, more often than not, her silence is a form of emotional self-defense. It's a calculated act of preservation, not abandonment. Because deep down, she may still wonder if you'll text. She may even hope for it. But the cost of initiating that conversation, of being vulnerable first, of risking rejection, again, can feel too high for her to pay. There's a kind of armor she's developed over time, forged from past heartbreaks, broken trust, and unmet expectations. And once a woman has felt what it's like to overextend herself emotionally, only to be met with distance, confusion, or indifference, she learns. She learns that silence, while lonely, is safer than chasing someone who might not value her presence. So no, she doesn't message you, not because she's forgotten, but because remembering hurts, because caring without reciprocation breaks something in her. This is the part most men don't see. They think if a woman truly wanted them back, she'd say something, that she'd overcome her pride, that she'd push past the silence, but what they fail to grasp is that her silence isn't about pride, it's about pain. It's a quiet form of strength. She doesn't want to be in the position of having to prove her worth again. She doesn't want to offer herself just to be ignored, or worse, half acknowledged. And so she waits. She keeps herself guarded, not because she's playing games, but because she's playing it safe. It's a delicate thing, emotional hope, especially when it's wrapped in silence. She may still check her phone. She may still notice your name when it flashes in her mind. She may still feel that subtle ache when certain songs play or when something reminds her of a moment you shared. But those feelings exist quietly, almost secretly, because she's trained herself not to act on them. She's trained herself not to confuse nostalgia with renewed opportunity. That discipline, that inner restraint, is something she's earned through experience. You have to understand something about women who've been emotionally wounded, but still choose growth. They no longer reach for what's uncertain. They wait for clarity. And if that clarity doesn't come, they'll preserve their dignity above all. She may want you to reach out, but she'll never beg. She may hope you remember her, but she won't remind you. That's not coldness, it's discipline. It's a silent strength that says, if you care, you'll show it, and if you don't, I'm not going to chase a ghost. This is where emotional miscommunication becomes tragic, because while she's sitting there quietly hoping for a sign that you still think of her, you might be doing the same. You might be waiting for her to show you a green light. And in that space between two people who still care but don't speak, entire futures are lost. All because the fear of vulnerability outweighs the risk of reaching out. But that fear didn't come from nowhere. It came from something real, something painful, something she had to survive. So she protects herself now. And part of that protection means not texting you even when she wants to. It means not opening old wounds, not stepping into emotional territory where she no longer feels safe. Her silence isn't indifference, it's strategy. It's the move of someone who's decided that her peace matters more than temporary emotional relief. She doesn't want to be left on red. She doesn't want to misinterpret your reply. She doesn't want to initiate something that might spiral back into confusion. She's been through that enough to know that some doors should only open if the person on the other side turns the handle first. And so, even as she hopes, quietly, internally, perhaps even reluctantly, that you'll text again, she remains still. Not because she doesn't care, but because she cares too much to risk being hurt the same way twice. Because when silence is her only armor, she's not going to break it for someone who didn't stay the first time. There's something quietly powerful about the way a woman processes emotion, especially when she's still attached to someone she no longer speaks to. She'll replay moments, conversations, texts, the way you looked at her when you were fully present, the way you said her name when things still felt real. She remembers those things, not always because she wants to, but because they etched themselves into her emotional memory. And every time she thinks about texting you, about breaking the silence, there's a part of her that whispers, "Don't do it." Not because she doesn't want to, but because her pride won't let her. It's not arrogance, it's not manipulation. It's the result of emotional restraint she's had to build over time. She's not going to put herself out there if there's even a small chance you'll ignore her. Or worse, respond with coldness. That pride, that guardedness is her last line of defense between hope and humiliation. And so even as she sits with the urge to reconnect, she swallows it. She might stare at your name in her contacts, rereading old messages, remembering how things once felt easy, and still close the app without typing a word. Because the fear of being dismissed has become louder than the desire to be heard. People assume that if someone really misses you, they'll reach out, that love or longing is strong enough to overcome hesitation. But that's not how it works. Not for someone who's been disappointed before. She might care deeply. She might still hope you're thinking about her. She might still feel warmth when your name comes up in conversation. But that doesn't mean she'll say anything, because the last time she reached out first, she got silence, or confusion, or a half-hearted response that made her question her worth. And once a woman starts questioning her worth in your story, she withdraws from the narrative altogether. This is the part that most men never see, the internal war between vulnerability and dignity. Because while you might be waiting for a message from her, wondering if she's forgotten, she might be doing the same, wondering if reaching out would make her look weak, wondering if you'd even care. That kind of hesitation isn't born from ego, it's born from experience. She's seen what happens when she gives too much to someone who gives too little in return. And once she's lived that truth, she never forgets it. So she keeps her silence. Not because she's over it, but because reaching out and not being received would do more damage than staying quiet. She doesn't want to put herself in that position again. She doesn't want to feel that sting again. And so even though she might hope you'll text, she waits. Not because she's trying to make you chase her, but because she can't afford to chase someone who isn't reaching back. You have to understand that for many women, pride is not the enemy of emotion, it's the protector of it. It's what stands between them and another emotional collapse. When a woman has been let down, she doesn't forget how it felt to wait for a reply that never came, or to pour her heart into a message and get a dry response. That kind of thing changes the way she interacts with silence. It teaches her that hoping isn't always enough. That effort, when it isn't mutual, becomes self-sabotage. And so she holds herself back, not out of cruelty, but out of survival. She might even test herself. Write the message in her notes. Reread it. Imagine sending it, and then delete it. Because even though she wants to know if you still think about her, she's not going to ask. Even though she wonders what would happen if she reached out, she stops herself. She tells herself that if you really cared, you'd show up. You'd reach out, you'd bridge the distance. Because she believes that if a man wants to speak to her, he will. This kind of pride doesn't erase the emotion, it just contains it, keeps it from spilling into places where it might be wasted. She still feels everything, she still hopes, still wonders, still misses parts of what you had, but she's taught herself how to sit with that instead of acting on it. Because she's been through enough to know that silence, while painful, is sometimes safer than starting a conversation that leads nowhere. So the next time you wonder whether she's thinking about you, the answer might be yes. But she won't text, not because she doesn't care, but because she does. And she's not willing to gamble with that care again unless you give her a reason to believe it won't cost her more than it's worth. You might think she's done with you because she hasn't reached out. You might assume that her silence means the door is closed. But what if I told you that deep down she's watching, waiting, not passively, but carefully? Sometimes she doesn't text, not because she doesn't care, but because she wants to see, if you will. Whether consciously or not, she's watching to see if you still have the initiative to reach across the silence. And this isn't about playing games. It's about something much deeper, emotional intent. When a woman withdraws after a connection that once had meaning, it's rarely final in her heart right away. What she does instead is step back into a state of observation, not because she's cold or manipulative, but because she needs to feel safe. She needs to know, without having to ask, that the interest was real, that the connection wasn't just momentary or one-sided. And in this quiet waiting, a subtle test begins, one you probably didn't even realize you were taking. She might be sitting there with her phone just like you are, wondering if you'll reach out, wondering if you'll fight through the silence, if you'll notice her absence, if you'll care enough to break the tension between you. Because it's not just about receiving a message. It's about what that message means. It's about what it says regarding your character, your capacity to lead, your willingness to take emotional risks. She may be testing whether you're still holding on to the thread of what once was, or whether you've let it fray into nothing. Now, some will say that's unfair, that you shouldn't have to prove yourself. But that's missing the point. She's not asking for a grand gesture. She's not asking you to fix everything. She's looking for initiative, for sincerity, for some small but meaningful act that says, I still care. Because if you won't reach out, then maybe she was right to stop trying. Maybe her stepping back wasn't just reaction, it was revelation, a way to expose the truth of who would keep showing up once the attention faded. In relationships, especially in the aftermath of confusion or distance, people often mistake withdrawal for resolution. They think, well, she's quiet, she must be fine. But quiet doesn't always mean closure. Sometimes it means pause. Sometimes it means I'll wait a little longer to see if he meant what he said when he said he cared. She might be hurting. She might be missing you. But what she won't do is chase you. Not because she's heartless, but because she's tired of chasing people who aren't willing to meet her halfway. So instead of texting first, she watches. She gives space. She waits to see if you'll make the effort. Because if you're not willing to step forward now, when the stakes are this low, how can she trust you to show up when life gets hard? This is the emotional logic running beneath her silence. And it's not manipulation, it's self-respect. She's not going to invest where there's no return. She's not going to give energy to something that leaves her uncertain and exposed. And it's here that many men miss the opportunity to show up when it matters most. They overthink, they misinterpret the silence, they convince themselves she's moved on and that any message now would be unwelcome. But often the opposite is true. She might be longing for that message, not because she can't live without it, but because it would give her peace, confirmation, something real to respond to. But she'll never beg for that moment. She'll wait. And if it never comes, she'll accept that too. It's easy to say if she wanted to, she would. That's the mantra of people who've never had to guard their hearts from disappointment. But the truth is, if you wanted to, you would. And she's looking for that, not in desperation, but in quiet observation. That's the test. It's not a game, it's a filter, a way to separate those who talk from those who act. So don't be fooled by the silence. Don't misread her distance as disinterest. She might be hoping secretly, quietly, cautiously that you'll reach out, that you'll care enough to take the first step, that you'll remind her that the connection you shared wasn't just a flicker, but something worth returning to. Because sometimes the message she's waiting for is the one you're afraid to send. So one of the hardest things to understand about someone who still cares for you but doesn't reach out is this. Silence doesn't always mean indifference. It often means conflict. And not just conflict between you and her, but a deep internal war within her own heart. She might still think about you, still miss parts of what you shared, still feel a lingering hope that somehow something will shift. But alongside that hope is fear. Alongside the longing is doubt. And that internal tug-of-war becomes so exhausting, she decides not to act at all. See, when a woman truly liked you and things didn't go the way she expected, there's a kind of disorientation that takes place. She starts questioning whether what she felt was real. Not just what you felt, but what she felt. Did she imagine the connection? Did she read too far into your words, your gestures, your attention? And that doubt begins to spread. She wonders if reaching out would make her look foolish, if sending that message would make her feel even smaller than the silence already does. She becomes stuck, not because she doesn't care, but because she's scared that caring again might break her in a way she won't come back from. This is the emotional complexity that gets missed when we oversimplify human connection. We think in binaries. If someone doesn't text, they must be done. If they walk away, it must mean they don't feel anything anymore. But that's not how it works. Emotion doesn't shut off like a light switch. It lingers. It repeats. It questions itself. And when someone truly meant something to her, the feelings don't just disappear, they bury themselves under a protective layer of silence. A silence that's not cold, but cautious. She's torn between wanting to hear from you and believing that if you wanted to speak to her, you already would have. That tension builds. She wants clarity, but fears rejection. She wants peace, but isn't sure how to find it without reopening a door that once left her standing alone. And so she lives in this space of emotional limbo, checking her phone but never typing a message, thinking of what she'd say but never saying it, replaying memories while trying not to dwell on them. It's not a lack of interest, it's the presence of too much uncertainty. She's trying to protect her dignity. Not because she doesn't feel deeply, but because she does. She's trying to keep herself from spiraling back into a place where she has to chase love, chase attention, chase clarity. She's been there before. She's felt what it's like to be the one who always initiates, always asks, always explains, and eventually that experience leaves scars. Scars that make her cautious, calculated, and yes, quiet. And so when she doesn't message you, it's not because you're forgotten, it's because you're remembered too well. Remembered in a way that still affects her, in a way that still holds emotional weight, but the memory of what didn't work is just as strong as the memory of what did, and now she's unsure which one to trust. That's the internal conflict she's caught in, not a lack of feeling, but a fear of repeating old pain. Now here's where many men get it wrong. They assume that if she's not talking, she doesn't care, they move on, thinking they were dismissed or replaced, but more often than not, the silence you're interpreting as closure is actually the result of her overthinking every possible outcome of speaking first. She imagines the conversation. She imagines your reaction. She imagines what happens if you don't reply, or worse, if you reply with detachment. And that imagination, though invisible to you, is vivid enough to paralyze her. And you have to understand, when someone's inner world is filled with that kind of conflict, that kind of fear, that kind of doubt, it takes a lot more than curiosity to make her break her silence. It takes assurance. It takes clarity. It takes knowing, not guessing. And if she doesn't feel that from you, if there's ambiguity or emotional inconsistency, she'll stay quiet, even if every part of her wants to reach out. So she doesn't. She waits. She wrestles with her emotions privately, because it feels safer to stay in the discomfort of wondering than to open herself up to another wound. And unless something changes, unless you show her a reason to believe that reaching out won't end in regret, she'll keep that distance. Not because she's moved on, but because she's still hurting in silence. Because when her heart is at war with her pride, silence becomes the only place where she feels safe. Sometimes she doesn't reach out because she's hoping you will learn to value her in her absence. That might sound counterintuitive, even frustrating, especially if you're the kind of person who believes communication should be simple and direct. But human emotions aren't that neat. They're layered with meaning, with unspoken needs, with subtle ways of expressing what we're too afraid to say out loud. When someone pulls back, especially someone who genuinely cared, it's not always a final goodbye. Sometimes it's a pause to see what happens when they stop showing up. It's an invitation, not a rejection. An invitation to reflect on how you treated her when she was there and how you feel now that she's not. See, when a woman feels underappreciated, when she starts to sense that her presence is being taken for granted, something powerful begins to happen. She won't always confront you about it directly. She might not complain or beg for your attention. But she will withdraw, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. She wants to know, if she stops texting, if she stops calling, if she stops giving, you'll notice. She wants to know whether what she was offering held any real value to you, or whether it was just background noise you barely noticed. Because the truth is, we often don't know what something means until it's no longer within reach. She's not asking for you to worship her. She's not demanding constant praise or attention. What she's hoping for is recognition. She wants to know that who she is and what she brings into your life has weight, has substance, has meaning beyond convenience. And when she feels like that's missing, when she senses you're coasting along, assuming she'll always be there, she stops, not to punish you, but to test the balance of value in the relationship, to see if the scale ever really tipped in her direction, or if she was carrying the emotional weight alone the entire time. Now here's where it gets even more complex. Even in her silence, she's still hoping you'll notice. She's still checking her phone, wondering if you're thinking about her, wondering if you finally realize the gap her absence has created. And every day that passes without a message, without any effort from you, that hope starts to shrink. She doesn't want to feel that you only see her worth when she's gone, but ironically, that's the only moment where the truth starts to surface. And she goes quiet, and you suddenly feel the shift, that emotional emptiness, that lack of presence. It forces you to confront something you may have ignored for far too long. She gave you her time, her affection, her attention. And maybe you didn't abuse it. Maybe you didn't mistreat her outright, but did you value it? That's the question that echoes through the silence. Not because she wants to guilt trip you, but because she's asking herself if it's worth coming back. If the connection held enough weight for you to even miss it when it's gone. It's a harsh way to learn a lesson, but it's often the only way some people wake up to what they're about to lose or already have. And it's not that she's playing some manipulative waiting game. She's not sitting there plotting your next move. She's just hoping for proof that her value wasn't invisible, that her presence didn't go unnoticed, that your appreciation for her wasn't conditional on her being the one to initiate, to show up, to carry the conversation. Because that kind of dynamic gets tiring. It drains her. It makes her feel unseen, even while being close. So she steps back not to disappear, but to allow space for you to decide whether you care enough to step forward. There's a kind of clarity that comes with absence. It magnifies things. It highlights who we think about when no one is demanding our attention. And when she chooses silence, it's not because she stopped thinking about you. It's because she wants to know whether you're thinking about her, whether her silence feels loud in your life, or whether it just blends into the noise of everything else you barely notice. That's the line she's watching from, quietly, hopefully, but without any guarantees. And what she's hoping, even if she won't admit it, is that you'll see her worth without her having to prove it anymore. That you'll remember the little things she did, the ways she made you feel, the care she offered freely. That you'll realize she mattered not just in hindsight, but in real time. Because the worst kind of pain isn't being forgotten, it's being remembered too late. That's why she doesn't reach out, not because she doesn't care, but because she wants to see if you care enough to notice she's gone. Sometimes silence is not just silence. It's a defense, a boundary, a decision to self-preserve after being emotionally stretched too far. When she doesn't text you, even though she still thinks about you, still replays conversations, still feels something, it can be because she's begun to rebuild the emotional walls she once let down for you. And the decision not to reach out anymore isn't fueled by the absence of feeling, but by the overwhelming weight of emotional exhaustion. A kind of tiredness that doesn't come from just being ignored or neglected, but from repeatedly showing up emotionally and feeling like it didn't matter. You have to understand how subtle this process is. At first, she's available, responsive, emotionally generous. She puts effort into the conversations, into planning things, into showing up, not because she's desperate, but because she believes in the connection. She believes there's potential. She thinks maybe this is something worth giving energy to. And she offers that energy freely, but with hope. Hope that it will be reciprocated, appreciated, respected. Not necessarily matched in quantity, but at least mirrored in intention. And when it isn't, when she's left guessing how much you really care or where she really stands, that's when something inside her begins to shift. That shift isn't loud, it's not dramatic, it's quiet, subtle, invisible even, but it's real. It's when she starts second guessing if sending that message is even worth it. If initiating one more time will just make her feel smaller. If you even notice her absence when she pulls back. And when she senses that her presence didn't carry weight, she starts detaching. Not because she wants to, but because it's how she survived the emotional imbalance. That detachment becomes her refuge. It becomes a necessary shield between her and the pain of unreciprocated effort. What most people don't see is that this emotional withdrawal often comes after deep internal conflict. It's not like she woke up one day and decided to stop caring. No, she probably cared too much for too long. and didn't feel safe enough to express just how deeply your lack of engagement affected her. So instead of confronting it, instead of demanding validation, she just disappears, emotionally first and eventually physically. And when she goes quiet, you're left with an illusion that she moved on easily, that she didn't care as much as you thought. But that illusion is just a mask covering emotional fatigue that she's no longer willing to explain. And here's where it becomes even more tragic. Even though she's stepped back, she still wishes you'd reach out, not so she can reattach instantly, but so she can feel seen, understood, so she can confirm even for a moment that her emotional investment wasn't invisible. She's not waiting for grand gestures, she's just waiting for basic recognition, for an acknowledgement that her effort mattered, that her presence made an impact, but she won't ask for it anymore. She's too tired to beg to be seen. This exhaustion is cumulative. It builds slowly, interaction by interaction, moment by moment. Every time she waited for a reply that didn't come, every time she opened up and you responded with indifference or vagueness, every time she made space for you in her life and felt like she was filling silence instead of building something real, it wears her down in ways you can't see until it's too late. Till the smile becomes mechanical, the replies become delayed, the conversations shrink, and finally the silence sets in, not as a threat, but as relief. And it's not because she wants you to chase her. It's not a game. It's not manipulation. It's emotional self-protection. It's what happens when someone keeps giving and doesn't feel met. When she loves quietly but watches her love echo into emptiness, she learns that if she doesn't protect her energy, no one else will. And eventually, silence becomes easier than vulnerability. Distance becomes safer than hope. You might look back and think she gave up too quickly, that she should have said something, fought harder, held on longer. But what you don't see is that she already did. You just didn't notice it when it was happening. You didn't see the moments where she tried in small ways, subtle ways, consistent ways, until the silence wasn't a sudden break, but the end of a long pattern of slow fading, one you didn't realize until she was already gone. And now if you're sitting there wondering whether she hopes you'll text again, the answer might be yes, but the version of her that hoped is also tired, worn down. She may still care, but the cost of reaching out emotionally, psychologically is too high. She's not just guarding her heart. She's guarding her energy, her peace, her sanity, because there comes a point when the quiet she once feared starts to feel like the safest place in the world. And in that silence, she finally finds the thing she gave to you so freely: attention, patience, care. But now she's giving it to herself